Hi folks, so welcome back to another lesson, and today we're going to look a little bit about astronomy, learning about the universe. So we're going to look at examples of telescopes used by astronomers, state that astronomers look at the electromagnetic spectrum to learn about the universe, research and learn about different telescopes, which I'm going to set as an assignment, describe the basic features of a telescope, and if we were in class, I would show you how to measure the focal length of a lens and use that to build a telescope. So to get you thinking about it, what does a telescope look like? So pause the video and have a wee think. Look at the photo if you're not sure. Now, most people would probably tell you that the picture here is what a telescope looks like. It's like a tube where you look down one end and you point the other end at the thing you want to look at, and it magnifies whatever you're looking at. Well, in actual fact, most telescopes astronomers use don't look like that. In fact, they look like these. So these telescopes are the ones that are used by astronomers, and these are called radio telescopes, and they look at radio signals that come from outer space. So, for example, here we have one in Cheshire in England called Jodrell Bank, and you can see the size of this telescope because there's a house in the picture to give you an idea of the scale. This one here is called the Arecibo, and unfortunately, this year, this telescope actually broke apart and was dismantled. And that was partly because it was just getting too old. But if you've ever watched any movies, you might have seen it appearing in movies. Um, this one here is called the Very Large Array, and it's actually made from individual satellites, telescopes, sorry, which are about the same size as this one here. And this telescope is quite unusual because each of these will actually move so that you can configure these into different shapes, and that allows you to see different parts of the skies. Now, these are so big, I don't know if you can see it in the photograph, they're actually moved by railway. And so these are railway tracks, and it's located in the middle of a desert in New Mexico. So telescopes come in all different shapes and sizes, and they look at a whole range of different things. So, one of the most famous telescopes, I hope, that you know is called the Hubble Telescope. And this telescope is famous because it's actually found in space and it orbits around the Earth, and it can look at ultraviolet, visible, and infrared parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. I'll talk more about the electromagnetic spectrum or the EM spectrum a bit later on. Now, Hubble was really, really important because it was the first kind of telescope that was located outside of Earth, and it meant that astronomers for the first time could look much further than they could ever before. And as a result, there's some really, really beautiful photographs that have been taken by Hubble. Hubble also is quite unique because it was only meant to last for about 10 years or so, but it's been going for much, much longer than that, and so that's why it's quite impressive. So, some of you, I hope, will have done this topic in second year, which is the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, we're not going to focus on this too much. All I would really want you to know is that there are different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum: radio, microwaves, infrared, visible, ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays. And these are looked at by astronomers to tell them information about the universe. Later on in the topic waves and radiation, we're going to focus on this in a lot more, so we'll learn more about it and tie it up with what we learn today. To give you an example, these are the names of three telescopes that look at three different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. The Spitzer looks at the infrared part, the Hubble looks at the visible, so that's the bit that we can see. The Chandra looks at X-rays. And what astronomers do is they take these three different pictures and combine them to give us one kind of composite image. A composite, it's a bit like in art where we say a composition is made up of more than one picture. And the reason they do this is because if you look at the three photographs, you can see by looking at different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, you can get different information. So for example, we can see infrared to do with heat, so therefore there's a lot of heat around this galaxy here. However, if we look at the X-rays, we can see there isn't really much here. So by looking at these different images, we can get different informations. Now, one of the reasons why Hubble was really special was because it was located in space. And why was it put into space and not kept on Earth? Well, one of the biggest problems we have on Earth is something called light pollution. And you can see in these photographs here that this is a city where the night lights are on, and you can imagine if you were in the city and looking up into the sky, you wouldn't be able to see any stars at all, unless they were incredibly bright. Now we have the same problem in Scotland, although obviously not as bad as this in Girvan. If you've ever driven in or out of Glasgow at night time, you probably see that kind of orange haze above it, and that's actually caused by the street lights shining onto the pavements and the light being reflected off the pavements and going into the sky. And that's what we mean by light pollution. Okay? Nighttime light is reflected into the sky, which makes it difficult to see the light of the stars. I'll include the YouTube link in the files folder so you can have a look at this. It's a really interesting video. Now, to show you how this isn't just a problem in the UK, this is a map of Europe, and you can see where there are major cities, there is a lot of light pollution. And so this is why um, observatories are usually not found inside cities. So, to avoid this, telescopes are located in wilderness areas like Hawaii. And in fact, I've been told that the Galloway Forest, which is quite near to us, is called a dark sky area. And that's because at night time there isn't a lot of light pollution, which means it's very good for stargazing. And in fact, I believe there's an observatory at Dalmellington which sometimes do these dark sky observations. Now, what is a telescope made up of? Well, a refracting telescope, this is the one that you can usually buy if you're an amateur astronomer. So if you want to do some astronomy at home, you could buy a telescope like this. And there are two parts to this telescope. The first bit is the objective lens, so that's the end you point at the object, and this collects light. And the bigger this lens, the more light and the brighter the image will be. You might remember doing the pinhole camera in first, second year, and if you made the pinhole bigger, you got a much brighter image. The eyepiece lens, this is the bit that you put next to your eye, so that's how I remember it, and this is the bit that actually magnifies your image. So the objective lens collects light, and then the light is magnified by the eyepiece lens, so you can see it much bigger. Now, if we were in class, I would show you how to find the focal length of a lens, and then you could use this to actually make a telescope. But we will do that when we come back.